Oh, yeah, it's
Oh,
live.
we are live. Hey, welcome to Mr. Elmer's Music Lab. This is our second live stream slash now it's going to be a podcast. And I got my dingo ate my baby, actually, aka Alex is here. What's up, Alex?
What's going on? Great to be on.
Yeah, man. So this is going to be so much fun because, as the channel has been growing, I have seen in a massive amount of people that are just so much into the 90s music. So that's the topic of this live stream. And this podcast is 90s music. And I thought before we do that, Alex, just for fun, why don't you share kind of some of your first memories, like background memories on like 90s music? Because I know you and I are separated by a few years. It's more than a few, but
Just a couple.
just a couple. But I think one of the cool things about the 90s was just how powerful it was for all the generations. And for you guys watching, I know the thumbnail said we'd have Nick and Evan on here, and they just shot me a text. They're probably playing their guitars overtime, but they will be here in just a minute. So we will soon go from a duo to a foursome. Okay. So go ahead, Alex. Why don't you throw it, or quartet? I don't know. See,
Quartet?
I never played in anything past a trio, a foursome, quartet. I don't know. Depends on what type of band you're in.
The
We're gonna
band
throw around music
complex,
terms. Yeah. So why don't you go ahead and kind of share some of your first memories of like the spark of 90s music for you?
Gosh, so I've been thinking about that a little bit, and honestly, there's a bunch of kind of subtle things. What your parents listen to, what your friends listen to, what your friends' parents listen to.
Yep.
I remember hanging out with a buddy of mine, Shane, years and years ago, and his mom blasting the live Green Day shows live on TV, I guess pay-per-view or whatever it was, and just jamming out and just those impressions. But honestly, I think one of the easiest segues of kind of someone born in the 90s who, yeah, your friends are listening to it, yeah, your friends' parents, your parents, Guitar Hero and Rock Band.
Yeah,
Let
that's
me tell you,
interesting.
we're just such an introductory course to, if you want to learn an instrument, and maybe you're not ready, but maybe you just want to play with your friends. Like all
Yeah.
that music
Yeah.
was, I mean, you're getting Nirvana. You're getting. I want to say
You
you're getting the Rolling Stones out of that and everything.
Yeah. It's funny. So right there it is. There's my Nirvana, my Nirvana plaque.
There it
So
is.
yeah, it's funny that it's actually amazing. And then look, Alex, we actually have somebody watching us live. So welcome to the live stream. Drop a comment like where you're watching from, and we got a couple more guests joining us here in just a minute. But you brought up the thing about garage band, right? Not garage band. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. What was it called again?
Oh,
Rock
the
band.
Rock Band and
Yeah,
Guitar
so
Hero.
I was the snobby guitar player that's like, I will not play that. I play real good. But I think GM Byte Java. So Alex in the chat, that's one of the subscribers who is also a musician. So
Very
yes,
cool.
super
Welcome.
stoked. Hey, Java, will you drop in the comments too where you're actually watching from? And if you're listening to the podcast, drop in the comments post this live session where you're watching from too. It's always fascinating, and I think it's really powerful. Look at that, South
That's
Russia.
Russia.
That's amazing. Yeah, so we're gonna get some pretty interactive stuff, Java, on here. We're gonna have a lot of fun. So we're kind of going over, what Alex is saying about like the video games, right, and the exposure to 90s music, and even with Java in here in the live stream, who's from Russia. I think that's the beautiful thing about music is culturally it connects all of us. And the
Yeah.
90s was such a powerful decade of music and just the vast genre of artists that we had to listen to. And just for fun, Java in the chat, if you want to drop, and we can kind of go over those in a minute, some of your favorite artists from the 90s, like some of like maybe put like your top 3 or songs that you love, and then we can kind of circle around and discuss that too. But so yeah, like people's parent, and that's the thing too, I've noticed with 90s music, like my daughter knows a lot of the 90s bands because I'm her dad, and You know,
Yeah.
she rocks that because I played it for her from birth and she's still listening to it. But do you feel like it feels like that we're having kind of a resurgence like of like that 90? It feels like people want this era to come back. And we know it'll come back in a different manner, but everything is cyclical in a way. But do you feel like that's gonna like start to come back now or
I mean, I think absolutely. I think that what we're seeing is a lot of new music that's kind of trying to give you that old feel. But the thing is I don't see it coming from the United States. I know we've talked a couple times, you and I, about the Beths, and I love the Beths, and they have a very early 2000s feel to them.
Mhm.
They're out of Australia,
Yeah.
and there's another little bit more surreal. But there's a band out of I think South London, Goat Girl, and this is
Mhm.
just another one where the sound is different and the sound is still new, but there's this rawness to kind of what they're singing about that feels a lot more personal in the way 90s music and the way early 2000s music had an actual, even if it's not set up like a story, they're telling you something. And
Yeah, you know, it's
we're
funny
getting
too.
back to that.
I remember too, just to bring up a 90s band, but do you remember, I don't know if you're familiar with, do you remember the band Silverchair?
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
So, Daniel Johns was kind of, he was like a Kurt Cobainish lookalike.
Yeah.
And, but they were legitimately a great band in the 90s too. Now why don't we jump into this? So, cause this will probably take a while to we can circle around this and once Nick and Evan jump in here, but kind of the focus question of this whole talk is we can debate this, but was the 90s the last great decade of music? And now you and I have just set this up before you answer and what you think. And you guys can drop it in the comments what you think as well. But I feel like we also talk about how things crossed over into the early 2000s. So let's say 90s up to like 2010, right? That first 10
Okay.
year,
Yeah,
right? So because a lot of the 90s bands kept going and they're still going today. And a
yeah.
lot of them released great albums in the early 2000s, even though they were staples of the 90s. But what do you think? Like, what's kind of your opinion or thoughts of the 90s being the last great decade of music from a listener's perspective?
Now, I mean, I really think we may have talked about this, loosely over time, but it to me feels like the 90s and the 2000s are a 1-2 punch. It really is. The 90s are, like you said, a lot of these bands that are in the 90s roll over and spill over into the 2000s. And at the same time, a lot of these new bands from the 2000s are directly influenced by this complete change in, we go from grunge to alternative rock to indie rock. I mean, grunge and Nirvana completely kind of changes the way we look at what we can do.
Mhm.
And from that, you have all these kind of branches, and you kind of get the if 90s are the kind of the trunk itself, the 2000s give you all these branches, all these subgenres, and like
Yeah, that's
almost to me,
true.
like, it's a complete product,
Well, you
that's
know what? This is interesting too. So for those of you on the podcast, one of our live streamers, Java, so to kind of highlight his comment, how he says, "Wow, I actually don't really know many English speaking bands, particularly from the '90s, maybe like D12, but that's a hip hop." So that's a whole. But I guess I didn't even think of it from that perspective too. I guess I would just need more background on how. I guess I did realize, but I didn't realize how massive these bands were globally, right?
yeah,
There's one thing, some bands just blow up in their local culture, other bands blow up like globally. Like Nirvana, it didn't really matter where they played, even if you didn't speak a lick of English, that band resonated with you musically. So you've got the power of the music. And it feels like, in my opinion, the reason and I'm coming from, obviously, you know me, Alex, like a musician's perspective and a 90s kid and being in a band that toured in the 90s, and that band's still together and
yeah,
being entrenched in it. I do feel like, in my opinion, it was probably the last great decade. And I have a lot of, background with producing music and working with artists, but to me, it was that last great decade too, because it was artists that wrote their own material, that
Yeah.
performed their own material. So it feels like that almost needs to come back, because now we've got all the technology that everyone's using, right? Um, so do you ever think like another era of music like that will like come back? Like, do you
I
think that?
absolutely. I
Yeah.
think I think the thing with music is there's I mean, I know people that, today will love the 90s and don't want to listen to the 80s. And I mean, I've got bands that I love 60s, 70s, 80s, but you don't hear many people today talking about the hits from the 50s.
Yeah, that's true.
It's
That's
not their
true.
style. It's too slow for
Mhm.
them. It's not produced enough. And I think that we definitely hit lulls in
Mhm.
in what we get. I think that the problem now is actually the opposite. It's the oversaturation. It's almost so easy to make it and do something that no one has to try to be original to do anything else. There's the formula that works. But, like I,
Yeah,
I
true.
mentioned earlier when we talked about, there's the Beths, and there are still bands that are trying to create things that are new. I think they may be harder to find. It's just going to be a little bit more digging to find that diamond in the rough. There's just a lot more
Yeah,
rough. But there's always
definitely.
going to be, honestly, as long as there are just angsty kids and teens and young adults going through the ringer, you give them a guitar, eventually you're going to get something out of that. I mean, that's
Yeah, I think though too, like he's talked about, like you have to really dig to find artists now. It was so different back then without like having like YouTube and social media. You really had to stand only on the merit of your music, right? Like that
yeah,
was kind of the key to everything. Um, yeah, so just I feel like that's definitely going to come back because I think everything is cyclical. Like if that were to come back, like how do you think it would look? Like as far as like, do you think it would be more band, like seems like a lot of the band format is just gone, right? Like there's not as many I mean, in the 90s, there were bands
yeah.
everywhere you turned, right? And even solo artists. And there were like, think of all the different like genres. There was like hip hop, singer songwriter. There were bands. There was like, it seemed like it was all of it was going on at the same time and kind of pick your flavor and go with that. But I don't think that's so much the case now. It doesn't seem like well, I know for a fact budgets have dried up in the music business.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need record labels anymore. Um, but I feel like bands, like musicians that write and perform their own material, that needs to come back, right? Like, I
I
feel
mean,
like I
absolutely.
think that would be one of the greatest thing and I feel like it feels like now, just based on how fast the YouTube channel is growing and how passionate people are when I bring up 90s music, I feel like and people too. It's funny too, if you go on YouTube and you watch old videos of 90s bands and it's fun to scroll the comments and
Yeah.
see how passionate people are. I think I was doing it last night. I was watching a Deftones video and everyone was like, "Oh man, I missed that time period. No cell phones, no cameras, just go to the show, the energy." But it's like a lot different now. So I think even though those artists could come back, don't you think that it would have a different feel to it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would, when you hear something new now, it's kind of jarring, because
Mhm.
you're not ready for it because what you hear is kind of something that you're so used to it. And again, I think it's part of that internet wave of maybe, may, do record companies, record labels with slimmer budgets, are talent scouts gone? Are they, do you have people that are looking for new artists that are looking for the new up and comings, or is it you're waiting for the YouTube link to come up across your desk?
Yeah.
Because I would say, when I lived in New York City, I would see underground band shows that were waiting to pick up, and there was some incredible talent. And this is, wow, this is 11 years ago.
Mhm.
And I'm in some of these kind of underground bar scenes, and I had to have been 19, but I was working some of the events, so you kind of get to go in with the team.
Mhm.
And here were some kind of indie rock bands that are throwing in saxophones, that are throwing in just somehow you can make a clarinet work with a rock band. I don't know how it worked, but I can tell you that it was good. But I got to see all this incredible music that a lot of it kind of fell out, didn't go anywhere. And I could say when I was in LA, I saw a lot of underground shows in LA, even Missoula, Montana. I saw a
Mhm.
good amount of just shows at the local, whether they're bar shows, because bar bands, there's always going to be a bar band,
Yeah, that's
but,
true.
but they're
Well,
not getting discovered in bars anymore.
no, which I think that's part of the problem. Like you said, like, it was such an organic thing. Like, artists would go to bars, tour, play shows, and they get discovered that way. But now
Yeah,
it's like, you don't if you're an A&R person for a label now, you don't even have to leave your house. Like, it can
if
just
you have
scour the
good
web.
music, but you don't have good quality on your video equipment to put that music on YouTube or Spotify, you're not going to get found.
Yeah, it's a
That's
lot.
the problem. That's
Well,
there's
to
technology is helpful, but it's almost like there's that new barrier, that raw skill alone, and just by the skill of your instrument, it's kind of a little bit harder.
Yeah, it's kind of like, too much noise, right? You know what?
Yeah,
This I gotta highlight this comment because this is interesting too. So, Java says, how 90s was the time when Soviet Union fell. So it was a big breakthrough for foreign music for a lot of people in our country. But even before that, so I think we took for granted in the US,
yeah,
they were being like censored even back then. So I think that's what would be cool too. Well, one good thing I think with social media is it has opened up
yeah.
ways for people to access content like in other countries. So I think it'd be a great time for like all these like bands to come back and
Oh,
almost
absolutely.
kind of like bring back our memories of that era. Um, but yeah, so I feel like it feels like it's gonna come back. I know on my channel, I'm gonna keep striving to find all those people and connecting people that are into that, and who knows what'll come of it. Hopefully, we can create a movement from that. But let's do this. So some of the bands, let's just name a few for fun that you can think of that kind of crossed over into the 2000s. Maybe they came about like mid to late 90s and then went into the 2000s. And most of those bands, they're still going strong today. If they want to play
Yeah.
shows, they could still sell out shows. Like just to name a few that I love, and then you can throw in some of yours is like 311 still going, right?
Absolutely. Love that.
The Offspring still playing. Green Day's still going. I know, like we've talked about Blink 182, which I got to do shows with them back in San Diego. They're back together, the original lineup.
You
So
haven't
that
mentioned Chili Peppers yet. I mean, come
I
on.
haven't. I
I
know,
thought
and
that was your first
I
choice.
know we got to get Nick and Evan in here since they're such massive Chili Peppers guys. But
I've been trying to hold back all of my Chili Peppers commentary to make sure that it's for the full panel.
yeah,
Smashing Pumpkins. I
exactly.
don't know if you mentioned, because I know they went on a hiatus in 2000, but they came back.
Yeah, the Pumpkins are back pretty much with the original lineup, except for Darcy on bass. Deftones are still going. Weezer's still
Oh,
going.
Weezer, perfect.
Uh, if you guys want to throw any bands in the comments, go ahead. Whether
You
you're
know
on the
what?
podcast,
Rage Against the Machine.
oh, Rage Against the Machine. Oh my lord. Oh my
That's
lord. Which we're gonna branch into some fun questions here in a minute. Well, you know what? Why don't you ask it? If you guys too know the answer to these questions, throw it in the chat or throw it in the comments section. But I think you text me, Alex. But what was
oh,
one?
I gotta yeah, let
Yeah,
me check my list.
yeah. Check your list. So let's do like a little trivia question
Check it
action here.
twice.
So
Let's see. Oh yeah, the first one was what band thought they were pretty fly for a white guy?
I don't know if I should answer or should we give it? Let's give a few minutes. Let's give a few seconds since we're on a
A few
podcast, or
seconds.
throw it in the. But I can hear the riff in my head, and I think we just mentioned the band, didn't we?
Yeah,
Technically,
we did actually. Can you are you able to chat in the chat, or is that
I'm so new to this live streaming thing. I'm not
we
really
could
sure.
probably
Well,
post
why
them
don't
as
why
well.
don't why don't we just give the answer? I'll tell you what. I'll take a guess, and then I'll either epically fail again.
All good.
That's definitely the Offspring, right?
Okay, that is the Offspring.
Well, I'll tell you an interesting fact for me about that song is I don't I don't know why they did a song like that, but hey, that's my opinion. I
Is
don't
it because
equate
you don't
see,
feel pretty fly? Is that what you're
I don't feel fly at all.
I
No,
don't feel fly either. I mean, that's
I don't feel fly. You know what it is because I think of Offspring as that mid 90s sound. Like, so I'm thinking like Self-Esteem,
yeah.
you know,
Mm,
songs like that, Keep Them Separate. So songs like that, that's the Offspring that I know, but I know in the 90s and like everything, artists evolve and change.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so it was definitely an interesting period how some of them moved, like you said, the Chili Peppers, right? How they
Yeah.
have just like started in the 80s and never stopped. They're like a machine. But that's the beauty of finding the right parts and the magic of that. And somehow they were able to salvage it even when they moved through different lineups.
I mean,
Um,
their genre also, I think it didn't change as much as it evolved. Where I mean, if you listen to that late '80s, early '90s, it's heavier. It is definitely it's a lot. There's more going on. Where
yeah.
I feel like when you hit late '90s to 2000s, it's definitely more. It's a little bit more relaxed, and that's not to say that it's not
Yep.
intense, but there's a little bit more space in there. And
Yeah. Yep. Well, let's do this. So I got a set of questions from some dude named Dave in New
oh
Jersey.
gosh.
Dave, some guy named Dave. I think these are actually pretty good questions. So drop in the comments if you know the answers to these, or if you're in the live stream, drop them in the comments. So okay, or this first one's not really a question, but this will have some good discussion. So name your top 3 opening guitar riffs from the 90s. And since you know what, since somebody, let's just do this. So if it's a band who, for you, Alex, it started in the 90s, but they were going in the 2000s, you can even name that.
No, I think I've got all three of these songs will be 90s. That's
Okay.
I can step up to that challenge for Dave from New Jersey,
Dave
wherever
from New
he is.
Jersey, wherever that guy is. Okay, so wherever New Jersey Dave is, thanks for writing in, Dave.
Well, thanks for
He didn't
writing in, Dave. It's a pleasure
or
to have you.
thanks for texting in. I guess we got to sound more modern. So go ahead, Alex. What are like some of your and if you guys are listening on the
Yeah.
podcast, we would love for you to drop it in the comments section for us, and then maybe we can even turn those into some long form content on the channel. So yeah, why don't you name your top 3 opening
Top
guitar riffs
three.
from the 90s? Yeah, and then I'll
Yeah,
kind of
so again, just shout out thanks to Dave for sending that telegram in, that smoke signal with these
Telegram. I like
questions.
it came in by horseback,
We
actually. A
received
horse.
your
Yeah.
wire and deciphered the Morse code, but I think that
There you go.
we figured it out. I'm gonna say it may not be an exact top three, but it's three amazing ones I could think of right now, and that's gonna
Yeah.
be Nirvana, "Come As You Are."
Okay.
Um,
Lots of chorus on that. Yep. It's
just
so
that
distinct.
opening riff is just real nice into it.
Wait, before we move ahead, because people that are musicians that are listening, and I know I always have this conundrum in my head. I just want to use the word conundrum. Riff versus chord progression. So can we just, for the sake of moving forward in the future of these podcast streams, say that chord progressions and riffs are just, we're going to say they're the same thing. So
A little
I
interchangeably, that's I'm not
interchangeably,
thinking crazy riffs as much as
I would definitely define Come As You Are. I usually think of riffs as a sequence of melodic notes played one after another, as chords are chords, 3 or more notes played. But however, Come As You Are is a riff. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Come As You Are is a riff. All
So
right.
it fits. It fits, right?
It fits. Yeah.
Get a
It
gold
fits.
star.
Yeah. So why don't you go ahead and tell us so number 1. So it doesn't have to be your top 3, but so you've got Come
Okay,
As You Are.
that's a good one. I'm gonna say we're gonna cross the pond here. Song 2 by Blur.
Ooh, that's a
That
great song.
that's one of those bands that I can listen to some of their music. I've listened to some of their albums. I have some of their albums, but it's one of those bands that is as good of a band as there. That one song is there. That's the one that just hits. That
Yeah. Yeah.
song comes on. There's no second guessing who's playing, and that one really hits me.
Yeah, no, that one's amazing. That is that's an incredible riff. I remember learning that on guitar and being like, this is very cool, crafted in a
Um,
cool way.
and I will say again, because our chili pepper connoisseurs are not on yet, I will not be using any answers of the chili peppers. We're
You know what?
saving those.
Let's
There
text
are,
these guys right now because we're more of a modern. We're podcasting live streaming in 2023.
this is
So
2023. That's what I mean. What a year.
yeah, let's see, where are these dudes? Maybe they
So
got their times mixed up. Maybe they're like playing Chili Peppers riffs and they're all distracted.
that's
All right,
it.
so you got Come As You Are you got Come As You Are.
Come as you are. We got
You got
song two.
you got Song 2 by Blur, and what would be number
Now
3?
Testify, Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah, I almost think like right away when I hear riff of the 90s, Rage Against the Machine, it just comes to mind immediately, right?
I mean, they just Tom Morello is just something else. Oh hey,
looks like I have a future 90s band musician here. So
is that Dave from New Jersey?
That's Dave. Are you Dave from New Jersey?
Did you send these questions in?
Did you send in these questions? Looky, what's your top 3 opening guitar riffs from the 90s? Don't worry, I will for those of you that can't see on camera, my 3-year-old walked in, but I am training him well on riffage of the 90s. So he gets a massive dose of 90s music. So he's seen plenty of videos on YouTube and all that stuff. Alex, do me a favor. Let's just do this. Okay. Why don't you I'm going to have you take over for about 2 minutes or a minute. Okay. I just want you to go ahead and just keep naming some riffs. You know what? And if Java, who's in the live stream, you guys want to drop some more than 3, just name a few more. Okay. And I'm going to come back like seriously in like 30 seconds and then have you fill.
All right. Up, okay? And I want you to know that when you come back, I got to hear your riffs.
Okay. When I come back, I'm telling you mine. I'll be right back.
That's it. And he's gone. The dog entered the room. The whole team left. But I mean, gosh, if there's more riffs, that's, now we got to dive into the Chili Peppers. I mean, anything that they put out is just incredible. Or let me think. Everlong. Everlong is an incredible, I mean, that's a slow starting, just nice build up. That let me think, that's 90s, right? Is that 90? Everlong's got to be 99. But what about you, Java? Are there any riffs that really kind of got you? I know you said that there wasn't a whole lot of music coming in. Oh. All right, Java, sounds good. Thanks for coming out. I will I'll tell Harry that you said your goodbye, and we appreciate you coming on, man. You have a great night. But other than that, let me see. I mean, again, any Chili Pepper song starts out pretty strong. Got a whole lot of Foo Fighters.
Oh, I heard Foo Fighters.
That's so we lost Java. He's out for the night. It's almost 4 a.m. there.
Oh, wow. No worries. Thanks, Java, for cruising in. Now that's some dedication right there.
Yeah.
We need like another 100,000 Javas and we're good to go. It's all right. You know what? We're so new. Build it and they will come, right?
That's it. That's we tried to build a baseball field and we ended up with a roller rink and they still showed up anyway. So I mean, it's
exactly. All right. I heard you.
Everlong. Everlong was my
Everlong.
I mean, I'm thinking is that 90? That's a 90s.
That should be like 94. Right? Oh yeah, it's like 94, 93. The thing is, okay, I gotta just say this because I'm playing in a like a duet right now with a kid Max, and we do Everlong. This might be bad to say. I'm sort of getting sick of that song. Is it possible to get sick of Everlong? I think it is because it's happening to me because I have to play it so much and I've heard
mean,
it so much. And I know it's an amazing song. I am not. It's an incredible song and those guys are legends. But if anyone is sick of Everlong as much as I'm starting to get, drop that in the comments as well. So.
I will come to your defense on that a little bit and say
Yeah,
that
let's
it's
hear it.
because
Let's
you're
hear it.
playing it that much. And I mean, you hear it all the time. Anyone who's in a band, you're writing new music, you're changing your style, you're coming up with new stuff. You go to a
Yep.
show and everyone's like, play that one song we liked from your first album 20 years ago. I bet they're
Yeah.
pretty sick of that too. I mean,
Yeah, they're probably pretty sick of it too. I just feel like, well, the Foo Fighters have such a huge catalog. Do you know what? Let's just, since we landed on those, some of my favorite Foo Fighters songs are just their first record, which Dave Grohl played the whole thing by himself.
Now
Okay.
That is dedication right there. That is,
Yeah,
I want to make an album. I don't really know what I'm doing with anyone else yet, but I'm just going to make this album. And
exactly. And I will say, okay, so let me loop back because I'll name my top 3 opening guitar riffs.
Yes.
I will definitely say, I mean, I could probably list 100, but I'd say Bulls on Parade by Rage Against the Machine.
Perfect.
That one comes to mind. You want to know, we actually do this song too when we play gigs, but it's such a little simple riff, but it's so iconic. And it's the beginning of Today by the Smashing Pumpkins. Do you know that one?
Absolutely. That's
okay. So that one is beyond iconic. Today, but so Smashing Pumpkins Today, Bulls on Parade, and then a riff. Man, what else? I gotta say,
I don't know, when did Nickelback become a band?
Oh boy, unfortunately they became a band. Sorry, Nickelback.
Our next stream is going to be exclusively on Nickelback.
Nickelback. Look, our stream is growing. Welcome, you guys. If you guys are coming into the live stream, which this is now a 2-for-1, you're getting a podcast out of it too. Drop where you're watching from. Alex was just talking about Nickelback. We will try.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
We're gonna try and refrain from mentioning Nickelback again. However, I guess we had to at least bring them up because they did happen in the 90s. Okay, yeah. Since I didn't technically.
Your third riff.
I know you're waiting for my third riff. Yeah, come on, guys. We need you to name your top 90s guitar riffs in the chat. Okay, drop them for us. So. I'm not going to say anything by Nickelback, okay? You know what, though? I'm like a guy, so being a musician my whole life, I think I love simplicity, too. So there's something about, Sublime, the way Bradley would put together some of his songs. I'm going to say, God, what's an amazing riff by them? Probably just, oh man, this is such a tough question. I mean, I gotta do Nirvana though, because they're my favorite band ever. They're my number
absolutely.
one. They're my number one, but I'm gonna go with my favorite Nirvana song of all time is a song called Drain You. Off of although we do play Heart-Shaped Box live, and that's an amazing little riff that has a very interesting interval in there. Which we don't want to go down the road of theory, which I could do for days. But Nirvana is amazing. But those are probably my top 3. The Rage Against the Machine, Smashing Pumpkins, and Nirvana. But I mean, God, there's so many to list, right? We could
that's when you said top 3, immediately I said these are 3 that I know that I like. But
yeah,
I think tops are always hard. I mean, because there's so much out there. I mean, even just in this window of 90s music, there are so many bands beyond just, there's a lot of bands that are just less heavy that aren't going to have as crazy guitar solos or guitar riffs or any of that, but are still, I mean, I don't know how many crazy riffs I could think about from the Cranberries, but I could tell you a lot of crazy songs that I love from the Cranberries. I mean,
Yeah, the Cranberries. I mean, there was like so many songs by them. I mean, they had more than one song.
yeah.
I mean, there's just so many artists that we can talk about. I mean, I probably just go down the road of guitar-driven bands because I'm a guitarist myself and was in a band in the 90's, and, so I obviously who it kinda popped into my head that had some was do you remember the band Everclear?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Everclear had some amazing stuff. I mean, again, all just rock bands, right? Like, straight up bands that wrote their music, rehearsed it, and performed it at a high level. And that's really, in a nutshell, what the 90's was about for me. And not just the bands, but like all the hip hop guys that they were groundbreaking, all the solo artists, like solo artists. Let's touch on this real quick. So, like, solo artists of the 90's, Sheryl Crow, you had Liz Phair.
Hmm.
Um, God, there's probably so many I'm forgetting. I don't have a list handy in front of me. But yeah, drop in the comments too, like if you know of any like solo artists. I know in the last live stream, someone mentioned like Jacob Dylan from, Bob Dylan's son. What was that band called? The Wallflowers.
Mm.
Not necessarily, but it always does seem to steer back to the idea of bands. Like you had Counting Crows, you had the Goo Goo Dolls, I mean, it was kind of like no matter what your cup, you had Nickelback.
There
Sorry.
it is. You said it. Oh,
But my point
yeah.
being, I
What
threw
was that,
that
Harry? What did we have?
Nickelback.
Oh,
We need like a drop for that Nickelback. Urgh. You know,
we had
that
Nickelback. We
yeah.
had 50 Cent. I mean, if we're talking change here,
Yeah, yeah.
I
You
thought it was
had
interesting. Java mentioned,
Eazy-E. Yeah, Java
Easy.
mentioned.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
he was mentioning, of all the music they didn't get, he got
Dr.
Deep
Dre,
12.
Wu-Tang Clan. I
Like,
mean, you can go on and on. I mean, I was thinking too, like, you had like whole Courtney Love. You
yeah,
had there was so many like underground bands that were fairly well known too in the 90's. There was one pair of brothers called Ween, Ween, and they were kind of this like very indie, like all the indie bands that were amazing too, that were underground. So you had those guys, but it was pretty incredible just the variety of music you had to pull from. And
yeah.
again, it's pretty timeless, like we talked earlier in this stream podcast, that it just is that I think as long as those artists want to go play shows, people will come.
Oh, absolutely.
I know, for example, I just saw something recently, like 311 does a lot of those boat cruises, and people just look like they're
They're
having,
not doing that to play the music. They're like, put
yeah,
us on a boat,
yeah,
give
doing their
me a
thing.
margarita or
Yeah,
something, and
yeah.
we'll play. I mean,
The,
that's how you want it to be. That is
yeah.
the goal.
Yeah. Well, I think too, kind of moving into this segment of the talk here is like how we're discussing all the different genres of music. Like, I can't, now in the current state of music, I'm just confused by genres. I think all of us are. There's not, like, look what's happened. Like, country is like pop country, and people leave and become country. Like, in the 90's, it was kind of like, no, you picked your genre
Yeah.
and that's what you were. And then you just had segments of artists from different scenes, and they were true to that identity. So, like the Seattle scene, I mean, man, we could have a 10-hour podcast stream on just those bands alone, right?
Yeah.
Um, and again, I'm just speaking because that's the era I grew up in, and and being in a band during that time was even more powerful. So, and just the energy of like live music, that's what I think is like missing in our society, and I think that's kind of what is going to propel this to come back, and I hopefully we can be leaders in doing that and finding all the people and create some kind of movement for doing that. Like, were there any, like, if you had to pick like your favorite genre of music from the 90's, did you have a favorite, or did you just kind of like them all?
No, I mean, I definitely don't have a genre. The only genre I could say I don't love is a lot of the new stuff that we don't have a genre. You know, a lot of stuff that we don't know where this fits. But
Yeah.
as far as like the 90s, I understand why people like country. I can't get into country, but other than that, I'm kind of an open book. I mean, I listen to a good amount of rap. I listen to grunge. You know, I dove right into some of the heavier stuff, some of the lighter stuff. I mean, indie rock turned into, you know, a couple years later mixers with folk. You have indie folk in the 2000s. Like a lot of the genres that we had in the 90s are why a lot of the bands that I have in the 2000s even exist. If you didn't have the
Mm-hmm.
90s, you wouldn't have Linkin Park. I mean, that's
Yeah.
and that
Well,
that's its own genre shift on its own.
let's do this just to get a little more. So our friend Amber jumped on here. I've met Amber through YouTube, and she's a musician like me. And
Hi,
be,
Amber.
hey Amber, I'd be curious too. So what 90s art, and Amber's more of like a singer songwriter. So I'd be curious, Amber, like, do you have any artists from the 90s that are like close to your heart, or like anybody that you really enjoyed? So if you're listening on the podcast, I'll let you know what Amber says when she drops it in the comments. But again, like thinking of somebody like Amber, who's like a singer songwriter, there was so many people that had great records that were singer songwriter. Like I said, Sheryl Crow, who's still going, Liz Phair. Man, there was another one, Tracy Bonham. Have you ever heard of her? I found her on. She's amazing. She had some really good stuff.
Tracy Bonham.
Yeah, look her up.
Honestly, it sounds familiar, but I can't say that I have. So we're putting that on the list now. That's
Yeah. You know, maybe we can do for the next like stream podcast is we can try and break it into genres, and talk about the different artists and kind of who are leaders in that one. Because again, we could bust it into so many different segments. But like the Seattle scene alone, we could probably spend days on just that. And I think
yeah.
eventually what we'll do for you guys listening is we will probably pick a band to spotlight and then really break that down in detail, take a
Harry,
deep
what's
dive.
that band gonna be? What's the first band?
Well, we might have to do Nirvana or the
Oh
Red Hot
no.
Chili Peppers.
I feel like there was another one you mentioned earlier that would
Are we talking about Rage Against the Machine? Why don't you just drop it for
what
me?
was that band, Harry?
Not Nickelback. No, we are not going to do it.
We're
We
gonna
will
do
do
a
no.
6-part segment, Ken Burns style. So 2-hour parts. We're gonna do 6 of
Yeah,
them. The 12-hour documentary.
yeah. Well, why don't you let me know? There's one more band that kind of turned into like Nickelback. Do you remember? Oh God, what were they called? Puddle of Mud.
Yes.
Puddle of Mud, right?
Oh
Now,
my
Puddle of
god.
Mud, like they were cooler than Nickelback, but I feel like they turned into Nickelback. Now, I cannot remember for the life of me. I feel like they were early 2000s, right?
Huh.
I feel like they were early 2000s.
Maybe. Let me, you know what? Let me Puddle of Mud. Let's figure that out.
Not that they're that important for you to even
Oh,
look up.
no, it does matter because 1991.
Oh, okay. So is that kind of when they
They're a
came out?
90s band.
Man, 91. Wait, 91? Really? I don't think so.
Puddle of Mud. Up. Okay, well, it says either 91 or 92. I'm seeing both of those
Wow.
numbers, but
That's interesting. Well, I know the story about them is I'm almost positive. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but Fred Durst of Limp Bizkit had a label, and I'm pretty sure he signed that band to his label. So that's kind of how. But they were kind of in that Creed. You know who else was it? Wait, okay, come on. Just like I just said it. Creed and
yeah,
Nickelback.
yeah.
Pretty much the same band to me. I know there's so much hate on those guys. And listen, oh, there we go. Amber busted it out. Look at this. Here,
Oh wow.
let's show her first one. Okay, this is kind of cool. I mean, yeah, Sheryl Crow, amazing. But Sheryl Crow's singer, songwriter,
Yeah.
guitar player. Madonna, like she's pretty much transcends any decade she wants. Oh, here's a good one too. Jewel, Sarah McLachlan. Yeah, Sarah McLachlan, of course. Jewel was huge. It's funny. So Jewel was from my hometown of San Diego, and she used to play this little in corner cafe in Ocean Beach called Zanzibar that we used to play. And there was
Are they still open?
Zanzibar?
Yeah.
I think that's what it was called. I think it's changed, and I'm not in San Diego anymore, so I'm not sure. Oh, and this is definitely a good one. So Amber wrote Tracy Chapman. She does have an epic story. I did do a drop on one of my shorts on my channel of I was doing something. I said 90s music, and I dropped a Tracy Chapman song. You guys know the riff, Fast Car. You know that one?
Yeah.
You know?
Sorry.
Yeah.
I
No.
was looking up Zanzibar because
Oh yeah. But
I have drank there when I was in San Diego, so that was
there you go.
a blast from the past.
Yeah, but my point was, is someone was very quick to correct me that Tracy was not, that song was not released in 1990. It was released in 1988. However,
okay.
in my mind, I do equate Tracy Chapman as blowing up and being a part of the 90s movement. Again,
yeah,
just so many artists like kind of pick your flavor and you were set, but I think that's what we need to have come back is the whole singer-songwriter thing. Just more artists that get together in a garage and work on material. And then for those of you guys listening and that don't know, even Alex and I are going to work on a lot of music together, and it's going to be very 90s driven. And hopefully what we can do, if you're digging this content, go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel, because we'd love to have you, because we are crazy passionate about bringing this style of music back. Oh, look who's here. Look who's in the house. There they are.
Hey, are we late? We thought it was 6:30.
Oh, you know what? It was 6:15 Mountain Time. It's all good.
Oh,
sorry about that.
No, it's all good, dude. I said that we were joking that you guys are probably deep in Chili Pepper jams. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, guys.
Oh no, it's all good, dude. You know what? It's 2023. This is how we roll, So
that's 3 different time zones too. No wonder it's because I'm East Coast, so we're already at 9 my time.
Oh, yeah. You're totally right. Yeah.
Yeah, he's hard. He's going. Yeah, they're just getting started over there. You know what? So it's so cool too, because we were talking before you guys hopped on, like how we have like with 90s music, like how like many like generations it's like seeped into now. And you guys did the first stream with me, and what's super cool is, so people listening to this now, these are going to go straight to podcast on YouTube too, which is amazing. So hopefully we can get it out there even further. Well, let's do this. I'm going to do this with them, Alex. So and you guys will love this question. You guys ready? So let's do Evan and then Nick.
Oh, and let me just say before these questions are asked, I watched you guys on the last one, and because you weren't here, I didn't answer any questions with the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I left those for you.
He left those alone. Yeah. We don't want to eat crow when like the true Peppers experts come in here. We brought them up a little bit.
Oh man, don't talk us up too much.
I know, no. Well,
I heard they were a band, but other than that, that's just.
Well, we'll check this out. So. Yeah, we actually missed it. We had a guy from South Russia on the stream. How cool was that?
Oh, no way.
Then he's like, dude, I gotta go to bed because it's 4 a.m. But it was cool.
Oh my God.
Yeah. That was pretty cool. You know what was neat though? Is kind of cool to just like hop into that. Is he was mentioning how I didn't even think of this, like culturally, like Russia was so censored before it fell. They didn't have access to like the 90s stuff until that happened, and then all of a sudden they got, so that was pretty neat. Like I think we take for granted in the States like freedom, right? And just freedom of speech and music.
That must have been to just wake up and be like, hey, by the way, here's all this amazing music
that's happened for the last decade or so.
I know. Well,
he mentioned the Beatles and D12.
Yeah, D12. He mentioned someone.
That's your portfolio, and when that comes down, and here's thousands of other artists. I mean, that's got to be
definitely the blanks in.
Yeah, he's got. He's got the whole box of chocolates now. Well, let me ask you guys this. So this is from Dave from New Jersey. This question was written in by horseback. Are you guys ready? All right. So he wants you guys to answer. All right. So you guys can decide who goes first. Name your top 3. And Alex and I did this, and I said you guys would do it too. So I can't not wait to hear your answers. Name your top 3 opening guitar riffs from the 90s. Like if you have to, and it doesn't have to. So Alex and I did. We tried to clarify that riff and chord progression can just mean the same thing. So whatever you decide. What are your like top 3 like riffs of the 90s? If you had to narrow it down to like 3.
Oh man,
I know, right? That's hard, right?
There's so many that are so iconic.
I know.
Man, I mean, I definitely got to have some Smashing Pumpkins in there.
Oh, there you go.
I feel like a riff like Luna.
Oh my God.
Is the opening riff to Luna is just, it's sublime.
Okay, wait, just stop really fast. Okay, I'm not to interrupt because I have to tell you this. This is true.
Yeah.
Now, Alex knows before you guys hopped on, I mentioned, I'm glad you brought that up, but I mentioned the opening riff to Today, right? That is like iconic. But I will say, I'm glad you brought this up, Evan. That because the opening riff of Luna, it fades in. Remember how you'd have to turn it up really loud to hear it?
Yeah.
I think it's probably the most beautiful guitar part I've ever heard in my entire life.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
Okay.
It's
Sorry, I had to tell you that because
sound, you know. And
oh yeah,
it's iconic, you know, and it definitely kind of started a whole genre of like the emo guitar riffs that had that major 7 sound, which was, it's cool.
Yeah.
That's got to be one of them. I don't know, you know, obviously for me, probably a Red Hot Chili Peppers one would be number 1.
Yeah.
And you could pick a lot of them.
I know.
Probably like the most iconic intro would be Under the Bridge. Not necessarily my favorite because there's all so many, but that's a great one. That probably my number 1.
Wait, can I show you something really fast? Let me just grab the guitar. I'm not going to play it, but I remember the first time my teacher showed me that, and he goes like this, and I thought he had 10 heads. Remember? So we all know the C chord shape, right?
Yeah.
Right? And then when he goes like this, and he shows me you got to play this, I was like, dude, are you kidding me? Right? I'm like
such a stretch for the first time you try to do that.
Yeah, I'm like you're joking, right? You want me to what? Yeah, okay. So yeah, that one. And like what do you think would be like your like another one for?
I'd have to go hard rock, you know?
Yeah.
Like I'm a really big Korn fan. That's a little harder than hard rock, but
that's amazing though.
There's a lot of good Korn riffs out there that are insane, like the riff from Clown and a lot of that stuff. That I'm kind of all over the place with those because there's just too many, right? So
yeah, and for those like musicians out there, you tell me, because are those like C sharp tunings, like drop to C sharp, or are they tuned even lower than that? Yeah,
they're probably somewhere around there, I'd say. I mean,
like somewhere, yeah.
They're playing 7 strings, I think, too. So they're down there far.
Kind of like the Deftones stuff, like another like just so simple but so good. Yeah, those are amazing, dude. I know we could probably spend like a 3-day episode just on riffs from the 90s, right?
100%.
That's what we were saying earlier when he said it's a top 3. I can give you 3. But as far as a top, like that's a long list.
There you go. That's kind of the point I was trying to make.
Yeah. Every time you stumble upon a new one, and you're like, "Dang!" Like
I forgot about that. You know,
I can give you a top 10 riffs with like 15 different bands. Like that's already a big.
Right. You're totally right.
You could almost take like every Chili Peppers song.
You could,
right?
I mean, there's iconic Sublime riffs.
I brought up Sublime too.
Tool bass lines. I mean, those kinds of things.
Right?
All those bands. Pearl Jam. The opening to Yellow Ledbetter. I mean, come on.
That jumped in my head immediately.
Yeah.
Right when you said favorite riffs, I'm like, oh well.
That's a great one.
Talk about Yellow.
Is that one of yours then, Nick? Like the Ledbetter one?
Probably.
Yeah, that thing is.
I think Under the Bridge is obviously. I think it's powerful because that song's like almost 40 years old now, and everyone's heard it. As soon as you hear it, you're like, oh yeah, I know this song.
Yeah.
And it's even more impressive that John Frusciante, when he wrote it, was like, 19.
Mhm.
19 years old, and he's playing this. He's writing. Oh, let me just do an intro for this song that was like a poem, that wasn't even supposed to be a hit song, and now it's still played on the radio today. And like, even though I've heard it 500,000 times and I love that song with my whole heart, it's still impressive to me that it just like, there's your test of time right there. Like, even people who aren't even super into music will hear that, like, oh yeah, I know that song. Like, I've heard that song.
Oh yeah, it's
a powerful thing.
Yeah, that's like we talked last stream. Like, that's not even fair to do that at that level, at that age, or to even have the foresight to find.
Yeah.
Well, that shows you like too, like what a Hendrix disciple he was, because that was Jimmy stuff too. Just
100%.
Those ridiculous shapes and chord voicings, and we talked about it before, just playing pieces of the chords. And I mean, he was the best of the best and still is. So thank God he's still going and they're back together. Well, so
yeah, definitely.
Well, do you got another one, Nick, that you want to throw out there? Like, if you had to like pick one more.
Any of those like classic Nirvana intros. I mean, every time you hear "Come as You Are," you know what's coming, right?
That was one of Alex's. Yeah, that was his first one. He said.
You can't go wrong with Nirvana. I mean, they're
all just so iconic.
You know what? He brought up.
You could do a top 20 of those, honestly.
Yeah. He brought up a really good one it's kind of off the cuff band, but Alex, what was the
the Song 2 by Blur.
Yeah.
Blur yeah.
That's
that's such a good one.
Oh no. How does that go? I know that song.
It's because
really heavy guitar intro.
Yeah.
I want to say that they made it as a joke. And they were like, make it a single. And
it was like featured in a bunch of commercial, like it's everywhere, right? It's one of those
blew up, and they just thought it was funny to mess with the label, and the label liked it. And we're like, we're just gonna run with this. And it's their most iconic song. I mean, I
think it's hilarious that stuff like that just takes off. That is totally, almost like a play on the industry. And then it just takes off like nobody's business.
Yeah.
You hear so many stories like that too. Oh, I had that cassette on a 4-track and it was in a shoebox, and then like someone busts it out and they're like, "Dude, what is that? Play that again!" Like,
yeah. Well, I was talking about that with Seven Nation Army. He's like, I just wrote this and like thought, I'll never use it. And I saw an article the other day that said it's like one of the most publicly played songs like ever.
I believe.
I know, isn't that crazy?
Sports events, stadiums, and
video game trailers, commercials. That one was just
it's everywhere.
Yeah,
it's one of those melodies that grinds through your head.
Yeah.
Well, that's the cool part about I think like all those songs from like that decade too. They're just timeless, right? It doesn't. Good music is good music. It doesn't matter when it's released. It just stays good forever. But yeah, one of my first ones I said too, I still remember the opening riff to Bulls on Parade by Rage, like
do another list of them.
I know.
I think, what did I say? Testify, I think was what I went with. That's
you said that one.
It's a long list to pull from. I mean,
this
totally. Tom Morello. I mean, what a guy. Hey, what a guy to be such a time and place kind of niche guitar player.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily very technically proficient, but it didn't really matter because he knew his equipment and he knew what he could kind of get away with being in the band he was in. It was pretty awesome to see.
I'll tell you a cool thing just for everyone listening too. If you go on YouTube, you can find like Rage's first concert, like it's all grainy, like it's like a VHS. It's at like whatever college is in, like it's like Irvine or something, but it's really cool. You're like, oh man, if only they knew what they were witnessing, and then they turned in. But that's how it happens. But I think that's like what needs to happen with 90s music. We were saying is just, you guys are both musicians, like bands get together in garages and write songs and then play out live. But it's just such a different, world now. Like A&R guys don't go out to bars and look for bands anymore. They go to YouTube or they go to social media platforms. And I feel like now that we know there's so many people like us that are so passionate about that, I feel like it can definitely and will come back. Just it'll be interesting to see what form. So Yeah, that's cool. All right, let me do another one since Dave wrote this in from horseback. You guys ready for the next one? Just as
Were
fun.
you on the horseback, or were we back to Morse code and smoke signals? I know he's trying day and night. It's like Paul Revere.
I already know. I already know Nick and Evan's one of their answers to this, but I'll be curious as the second two, and then Alex. So your top 3 favorite guitar players from the 90s. So I mean, since we're on Nick and Evan, let's go there first, and Alex will head you. So I mean, you guys are probably. I mean, is it safe to assume that Frusciante is definitely in that list for you?
Yeah.
Is that would he be your number? Nick, he's your number 1. I don't know. Is that your number 1 too, Evan, or do you have someone you would?
No, it's definitely my number 1, and I'd probably go with Johnny Greenwood.
Oh yeah, of Radiohead.
Second. Yeah.
Oh man,
sure. I'm a big Johnny Greenwood fan, just as a musical genius, across the board. He's multi-faceted.
This is a treat for you then. Ready? Okay, look what I got. I got the old Marshall Shredmaster. The old
That's so cool.
the Johnny Greenwood secret weapon right here, dude.
Totally.
Plug into that thing and you're like, that's how he got that tone.
100%. Yeah. No, I totally nerded out on him and his like delving into his equipment and all that kind of stuff. I think he's definitely got to be number 2.
Yep.
The stuff he does live too, like the harmony lines, like on "Give Up the Ghost," just those little background stuff. He's messing with the loops, and he's got all just super on top of his game and different sounding.
He's got a crazy approach to creating sounds for sure.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Man, there's a lot to pick from. I'm looking through a few bands that I'd have to say
Kurt Cobain for me.
Kurt Cobain, yeah. I
mean, you guys are 2 of the 3 were already there. Cobain and Frusciante. That's I'm already right there.
It's hard not to crush on him, right?
Yeah,
I'm blanking on the guy who played with Alice in Chains right now for some reason.
Jerry Cantrell.
Jerry Cantrell. He's an unbelievable guitar player.
It's really hard, right? Because every musician was so stellar. They were like real musicians, like hard work, blood, sweat, tears. There were no shortcuts. It was just like they were like the cream of the crop,
Totally.
And he was a great vocalist too. You ever hear him sing?
Yeah.
Man, he's ridiculous. Yeah, I know it's hard.
Harry, I know something you and I talked about earlier. One of the big things you hear about a lot of music now is it has a lot of the same feel. And the hard part, I think, about being a guitarist in the 90s at that point is that every sound is different. You can't just play into the same, this is what's popular, this is what everyone's going to do. And that's the hard part, but that's the two-edged sword. That's the best part, is that these guitarists are as great as the bands they're playing with because of how they're playing together.
Right.
And, being able to go, I mean, Rage Against the Machine, right? Like just how does every guitar, if they're fit with that band, with that song, that is not going to fit the same way with the Chili Peppers. No. And I know that sounds obvious, right? But compared to a lot of the stuff that is newer, where it all kind of feels a little bit funneled, there's almost not as much room for guitarists in newer bands to kind of experiment that way.
Yeah, totally. I agree. There's a lot of bands, I mean, definitely right now that try to kind of follow certain sounds to a T.
Yeah.
And you're totally right that in the 90s there was a lot of different sounds that people were playing with. And it's just, I feel like nowadays the people are more textbook and by the book and try to kind of be more marketable and palatable.
They're going for perfection too much. Evan and I talked about this last stream because I know Evan records a lot of music like myself, and everything nowadays is like snapped to a grid, right? But back then, I guarantee you 99% of those bands went into a studio and laid down the core framework of every track, not to a click, right? Because that was the beauty. Yeah, you can hear it.
Waivers,
yeah, you can, and that's the beauty of it. But yeah, like sheesh, there's too many good guitars to list, right? But
what can you think of any more?
What about the? I mean, who's the Sublime guitarist?
Bradley Noel.
He's the one who's playing all those.
Yeah, he
all those
sings and
tracks.
riffs. Yeah.
So
You know what's so great about him is he was very simple, but perfectly effective. Right.
Yeah.
I actually did a short on my YouTube channel today about a finger picking thing, and I was actually playing the chord progression to Bad Fish, right?
Nice.
But I was showing like how to kind of play the bass lines and play the guitar part at the same time. And I remember thinking, like, his lines were so like just perfect. Like it was like, but it was free form jammed. He wasn't thinking like, oh, I'm an A and I'm gonna, he wasn't thinking like theory wise. And that was the beauty of it. Like bands were they just played so many gigs and so many shows. That's what's missing. It's like what you guys just said. Now it's so put together, so produced. There's no more record budgets. Everything's so.
A little bit of soul feels like it's lost,
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
We could talk, like we said, we could talk about Frusciante for hours, but I think one really cool part of like when he came back to the band in 1998 or whatever, it's pretty well documented. He was like, hey, my guitar playing is not in shape.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not as in shape as I was. So like, I need to write these songs that are super simple, 3 chords, little riff, California, right? What, 4 chords or whatever?
Yeah.
Around the world is a few notes, and they're these radio hits. And it's
Harry and I were talking about that exactly. Their shift in that late 90s, where they go from this earlier stuff is just there's a lot more going on.
Heavy in the groove.
It's intense. Yeah.
To like Scar Tissue, 3 chords.
Yeah.
And like these are huge songs, like we were talking about earlier, that like you don't even need to be like locked into music to like, yeah, I've heard this, I know how this goes.
Yeah.
You, like leave such a trademark on music at the time, and like it's just crazy to me that it's like it's so simple. As somebody who like plays guitar, Evan's the real musician here, but for me, like when I was learning, I'm like, oh, like this song it takes up so much space in my brain and so much space in my heart, and it's like this guy literally wrote it as simple as possible, but there's that deep, like that groove, that love that he's being, is being poured into it. That's just like, it's irreplaceable,
Yeah. Dude, Nick always like undervalues his stuff. Nick rips on guitar, dude. You do, dude. You're like so freaking good. He does. Not Evan, he does.
He always dumps on himself.
Yeah, he doesn't give himself enough credit.
I was a baseball player.
I'm gonna go on the record and say Nick rips on guitar.
So that's all it'll take.
Well, that's like another whole like topic. I feel like it's like we're like so hard on ourselves, right? We're like our own worst critics, but
that's major.
Yeah, yes. Like that's something we can all really. That's a whole nother podcast for another day. I'll try and stay on brand here, but yeah. I mean, yeah, so
well, can I say that's better than being the opposite though. That's better than being like, I want every riff. I want every song needs to start with my riff, endure my riff, and end with my riff. I don't even want vocals. I just want a riff. Like,
well, it's funny too.
Humbleness is good.
Last night I was at this like little songwriters thing, and they were playing songs that their bands were doing, and then the song was too long, and there was a guitar solo in there, and they were talking about how the guitarist was like saying, you mixed the drums too loud over my solo. And I'm like, just cut his solo if you want to.
Yeah, what?
Show the guy what's up. I'm like, it's all about the song, which is kind of like, I bring that up because like 90s music was all about the song, right? Like, yeah, there was some guys that had ripping solos and stuff, which I'm going to lead into Dave's next question because I cannot wait to hear your answers in this. But Alex, really, really fast, just because since Nick in it, like nutshell, like who are your 3? So Kurt Cobain, Frusciante. You said you agree with 2 of the 3, which is really fun.
Oh yeah, Tom Morello. I mean that's
yeah. I know it's hard for me to pick. Yeah.
It's a hard list.
What are yours?
A lot more.
Okay, definitely. I was sitting here thinking, because I've done like way too many YouTube shorts. You know how it is though? Like you start hearing like, oh God, that guy really is in my playing. Definitely Frusciante. I just can't help it. Dave Navarro, Dave Navarro's probably number one for me.
That guy,
Jane's Addiction, and then I mean him and Frusciante are like right there. And it's funny how like we talked the last stream how Dave joined the Peppers and he wasn't the perfect fit. However, if you listen to a lot of Jane's stuff, there's some very funky elements in it. Like
there's instrumental breaks in early Chili Peppers.
Yeah,
that sound identical to Jane's Addiction song.
I know, it's weird. Well, what's the one the one Jane's song that really comes to mind for me, and it sounds very Chili Peppers, is that song "Standing in the Shower Thinking," and it's a very to me. When I listen to that song, I'm like, oh fuck, I hear John playing this. Like,
dude,
I hear it's like it's so like cross pollinated.
It's that sound that they're doing these big open chords with like distortion and chorus. That's the 80s,
right?
Distortion and chorus.
Yeah,
and they got the big open drums that have like the gated reverb on there, and it sounds the same.
Well, it's funny, and I'm glad you said that, Evan. And he's one of my favorite guitar players, but it's hard to. I know when we say top three, we're just kind of speaking loosely.
100%.
But one of the best guitar players, like and I'm always talking about guys that serve the song in the band, right? Like, and everyone in the 90s did it because they were all great. And you talked about like chorus and distortion, and then it was the brothers in Stone Temple Pilots, right? Like, oh my goodness, like the bass lines, and then just if you think of like all the Stone Temple Pilots stuff, like just great rock bands. But like Kurt Cobain, everyone rips on his as a guitar player, but I don't think people see his brilliance of this. It's simple, but it's not simple. Like even like Heart-Shaped Box, right? Like that one little like line he puts in there. It's like that's just like brilliance. You know what I mean? So
what the song needed, right? Like it's perfect for the structure and the skeleton.
Yeah.
I think a lot of brilliance in that music from that whole decade was simplicity and where it all kind of fit in the mix, because in the 80s everything was very digital, very overproduced, very busy, and very snap to a grid like it is right now.
It was like super compressed. Well, you know what too, because it was so pop driven. It was the 80s was such a indicative, like such a pop driven era. And you're right. And then the 90s went back to like, we're in the garage, loose, we're loud.
Analog it up, dude.
Yeah. Well, like we're all on the same page, you know what I mean? So it's pretty amazing. Okay. So last question from Dave. Let's ask. So this is kind of funny. I was like, I don't really know the answer to this, but he wrote most complicated guitar solo from the 90s. And that's kind of a broad term because I think we'll all have different definitions of what would be a complicated guitar solo. But when I think of like guitar solos, and from the 90s, and I go to guys like Nuno Bettencourt, like you can't touch that guy, right? Like his solos and there were guys like Jason Becker who were like solo guys, and just these they were like Megadeth, right? Like Marty Friedman and Megadeth.
Daryl too. I mean,
Dimebag, like guys that solos like were their bread and butter. Like you don't touch those guys.
I mean, to be honest, and we have a friend that was talking about this the other day, and like people often look like for technical proficiency in like heavier music because it's it's faster pace and it's tighter in rhythm and stuff. So obviously, I think for guitar solo wise, like my mind always goes there, like to that genre.
Yeah.
Just because they're so challenging in my mind.
Yeah.
But like even if you want to do a more mainstream one, like the solo from Walk by Pantera, that's got a couple weird techniques and got a couple really fast little,
Oh yeah, I know that one.
But
what's funny too, then you have guys who used technology at that time era brilliantly. We talked about Rage, and what was Tom Morello's thing was the Digitech, the whammy pedal that you could play different intervals, and he was the one who really pioneered that hip hop style of playing on the guitar. And so I guess that's kind of a hard question. What do you think, Nick? Like
I don't know that I could name one off the top of my head, but
it's hard.
Let me ask you this: is U2 a 90s band or an 80s band?
We can still call them a night. I think we can define. Yeah, I think we can define anyone as a 90s band that still played through that.
Yeah,
they don't have to.
I'm not a huge U2 guy. I got exposed to them a lot because my dad really likes them.
Yeah.
But you mentioned one thing, like use of technology. That guy, uses like.
He's known for his delays.
Yeah, like just crazy. I loved. There's that. What is that called?
It Might Get Loud.
It Might Get Loud. That documentary.
Oh, that's amazing.
He'll like go through and he plays something. He's like, here it is, clean, like straight through the amp, and it's like two notes or whatever.
Well, that's why for me, I was fascinated. Remember, like Evan, you mentioned chorus and delay, like the staples, right? And they were heavily featured. Like, when you guys mentioned "Come As You Are," I think about the riff, but the first thing I think about is how it's swimming in that chorus.
Oh yeah,
that's what it wouldn't. The song wouldn't have been 80% of what it was without that effect. But that's production. That's a whole nother discussion. But like you said, Nick, like he's like pioneered that. Like like they call it like the edge delay, right? Like but like Dave Navarro, the same thing. But what I loved about Dave Navarro is he's got like two Boss DD3s, which for those of you listening that aren't players, they're just the most, right, guys? They're just the most simple, staple delays, but they just worked. And so he was so masterful and that was just that's what production and sound is. But it's hard to pick like solos and stuff. What do you think, Alex? I mean, that's a good answer though.
Well, this is where my answer is going to be. Like the politician here. I am not, I am the student of music, but I'm not the practicing student of music. I don't think it's fair for me to speak on the complexity of a solo like that because I don't understand enough of the physical complexity of playing that solo.
Let me tell these people listening though, and I told Nick and Alex, Nick and Evan a little bit about you before. So like Alex doesn't play an instrument, but he and I write a lot of material together because like we like the way we like to say it is like I just start pouring tons of sand in the sandbox like crazy, and then Alex knows how to come and shape it. But he does have a brilliant musical mind from a production standpoint. So he'll like point out stuff to me, even as a guitar player, my whole life, I'm like, oh wow, dude, I did not see it. That's what I love about music. That's what excites me. So you definitely,
I step back on that because that's like,
but it's a good perspective.
We talked about it earlier about, genres in the 90s compared to now, where 90s, it was, you kind of had your genre, you kind of stayed in your lane. And I know where my skill set is useful. I know where it's out of bounds. And when it comes to, this level of question, that's.
Do you have a favorite solo, like one that super sticks out to you from one of your three favorite guitar players? Like,
oh gosh,
maybe a favorite Tom Morello solo?
Yeah,
I have one in mind, but I want to hear what yours is as a fan of Tom Morello.
God, I don't. Honestly, the problem there is then we go back to the opening riff question where I could give you half of Rage's discography, half of the Chili Pepper. I mean, that's,
I feel you there.
I can't put my finger on one because I almost feel like it's a disservice to the other ones to be like, here's this one. They're all, to find the right solo, I would have to log out of this podcast right here.
And 20-minute deep dive and
set up the entire, my next 8 hours are Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah.
I will get back to you by snail mail from my post office delivered on board.
Alex, we're gonna have to fly to San Diego now and hang out with these guys, and then we'll figure it out.
Oh gosh, twist my arm, Harry. I gotta go back to San Diego.
Yeah,
what am I gonna do? I mean,
I know.
Come on.
Well, one thing that's kind of cool that I know Evan will agree with me that I think sort of ties in. You're saying like, oh, I'm not the practicing music guy. Like maybe you're not studying these solos, but like whenever Evan's helping me learn like a John Frusciante solo that I've heard 1,000 times in my head when I'm trying to learn, he'll be like, dude, it's a super simple scale, right? It's like, it's a super simple concept, but it's not the technique, right? It's the phrasing and how he's playing it that like some people
100%, dude.
Like when I'm trying to learn it and I like YouTube somebody else doing it, I'm like, okay, yeah, the notes are there.
Yeah.
But like, the way they're playing it, like the emotion that goes into it, like the force you're putting into your rhythm hand, and like the muting and all that kind of stylistic stuff is what, for me, is what hit me from a young age. Like, wow, maybe this isn't the most technical or challenging, the fastest, whatever, but like the way he's doing it, although it may be simple, like hits my ear in such a way that I'm just addicted to.
Yeah,
you know?
it's pretty amazing.
Like you're saying, I don't practice, but at the same time, like I might say, oh, this is my favorite solo. It's a really simple, 8 notes, or you know.
And well, that's what I call that's honestly, you know, when I think about, you know, Harry and I, we do a lot in music, and I also, you know, I dive into writing and in different creative fields, and I like to call that just the magic of the craft. And when I think about the magic, it's, you know, once we can explain something, it's science, there's a formula. Before we can explain that, the things that we can't explain, the way it just sounds right. And you know, like just these different aspects that it could be something simple, but why does it sound more than that? I love the idea of just kind of accepting that that's the magic of it. And from the creative standpoint,
100%. Just accepting it, right?
If you overanalyze it, you ruin the magic. And if you let it just flow, that's when it's still, that's what Harry was saying with these newer bands, when they're kind of following this main formula. You can perfect the equation. You're not going to get the same result because you're trying to figure out every variable to the T. You're not leaving room for that magic with a lot of this new music. And that's kind of how I look at it, where I go, here's what I know, but it's okay to not know the things that
that's the part that gets your heart thumping.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't know. I don't know how he does that. It's
so
good.
Yeah.
And like Harry was saying, sometimes it's part of that mix. Sometimes it's sometimes the production value mixed with the skill of that player. And you find that perfect balance. That perfect balance is different for every song, for every band, for every album. And that's the magic factor that I just, when you hear it, you hear it.
We got to add into it. Doesn't hurt John that he's got Chad and Flea as his rhythm section.
Oh no,
that'll never hurt you. But you know, right, Evan, like it's like 95% of John's stuff is just like major, minor pentatonic, but it's just the way he uses it, right?
It's
just
everything he plays is in the minor pentatonic.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
Yeah, he just adds little minor scale notes in between, and it's a simple equation. It's beautiful.
But if it works, right? I mean,
you know I thought of a perfect example for what you're saying. That major seventh chord that's in between the verses of Under the Bridge, you know, if you listen real carefully, each one has a different little tiny amount of like string buzz, where like his finger maybe moved a little bit, and it's got like the little kind of hum, that sort of hum in between. And it's like, you could try to do that again, right? Like you could try, but like the way that it came out on the record, it's like, who knows? If you asked him, he'd be like, I could describe what's happening, but like I can, you know, could he do it perfectly again? Like maybe he could. But
let's do this then, Nick, because let's kind of bookend it. So I got to relieve Grandpa from babysitting here, but but I will say this: what you just said pretty much encompasses everything that was 90s music, right? It was just musicality, musicianship, like artists. So let's do this. Let's end it with and then I'll make sure I give you guys the right time next time. Yeah, we have a small task between the four of us. We only have to save 90s music and bring it back to the world.
Right, we're gonna meet 4 a.m. South Russian.
Yeah, we got to start somewhere.
Okay. Well, that's easy. Okay.
Yeah,
we can figure that out.
Which is pretty amazing. So once our live stream ends, it goes straight to podcast too. So we're going to be all over the place. Nice. But let me ask you guys this: if you were to predict, and however it may come back, like in the next whatever amount of time you think it is, when do you think this style of music, of bands playing shows, artists that get back to writing their own material, being like garage bands, that's what they all were. They were all garage bands. Whether they, you know what I mean? What do you guys think? What do you think would be the top, like the realistic based on where we are culturally and in the world with techno, like what do you think that guys that's gonna like happen? Like is it gonna happen? Yeah, like do you think it's gonna happen in years? Does it feel like it's starting to happen? It's gonna take a while.
Like it's starting to happen for sure. I mean, at least personally, I'm into like a lot of pop punk and emo music, and that's making a huge comeback. And I think there's a lot of revival in the way of like oldies bands that are coming out. The young kids playing oldies, and like bands like Greta Van Fleet, bands.
Yes, that's amazing.
There's a bunch of soul bands that are coming out that are young kids that all play like 80s sounding and late 70s sounding soul. So I think these bands are kind of coming together, and I think it's a matter of time before people get all washed out on the mainstream kind of hip hop that's become the top 40.
Yeah,
and because you know as well as I do. I mean, everything
ebbs and flows.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, there was a huge scene of that in the 90s, but there was so much other alternative music that was so successful as well.
Yeah, good
so
point.
It is about time for it to come around the full circle.
I feel like it is.
I think it's like I'd say like 6 to 10 years.
I agree, because you know what else you see is what else is hot right now? Everyone's buying vinyls.
Yeah.
Everyone has a vinyl record. And it just seems like today's youth, I say that as a 20-something, so like talking about myself, but everyone, it seems like the hot thing now is like, oh, that's vintage. That's old school, right? Like people buy like cassette tapes that have never even touched a Walkman before, you know?
Yeah, it's cool though.
It's gotta, like Evan's saying, like it's a matter of time before like the trend hits more or less globally, and like that becomes the top 40, like you're saying, like I think you see it in the music scene now, like more and more people are into like the old school style of music. Like nobody, like everyone uses Spotify or Apple Music, but like now you go to a record store, they're popping up everywhere. And like you see young people going there buying records. I think if that grows, you're totally right. Like
I think you're right.
I think one thing that really, just one more thing for me, because I want to hear your answer as well. But the one thing that shocked me, that kind of gave me a hint to this, was the fact that the band Turnstile won a Grammy.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys heard about that.
Yeah, I did.
That was I saw Turnstile as like this kind of grungy, pop punky, more heavy band, and then all of a sudden I heard they won a freaking Grammy, and I was like, oh my god.
That's a good sign though, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's a great sign.
Well, and can I say a weird silver lining of COVID, of the pandemic, is that people were stuck inside. If you're talking about bringing people back from, and Harry, I said to him a couple times, I'm gonna pitch them until I die, because my top band that I found in the pandemic was the Beths, and I'm gonna keep pitching them. And I found them because it was Death Cab for Cutie were doing these live at homes. And Ben Gibbert was doing these acoustic things, and eventually bring the band in, and he's just wearing a Betts t-shirt. And it's this Australian band that I will pitch them until I die.
It's the Betts or Betts?
The Betts.
Okay.
Yeah, they're good. They're like a good indie band.
It feels like an early 2000s kind of sound. But they harmonize, they have these great breakdowns, and it's just, I heard they existed before the pandemic on a smaller scale, but suddenly you're hearing about them. Well, now they're touring in the US. They weren't touring in the US before the pandemic. You suddenly have, everyone is locked in, and everyone suddenly realizes I can stream stuff all day. I can watch this music and listen to it all day. But what am I missing? I'm missing seeing the real thing.
Yeah.
And we're having this kind of, things are opening back up and we want to go out. What do we want to do? I want to hear my favorite band play. I want to hear the bands that I love play. I think that right there is going to help spark people to go, let's get into that garage and let's make that. And we have that technology. You can get GarageBand for free or the Mac or whatever, and you can make a decently produced album.
Totally.
And it's almost a new wave of the garage band, because you may not have the studio backing yet, but you have a certain level of mixing capabilities on your own to be like, now I don't know if the Bets use GarageBand. I mean, I'm not trying to make that a connection there, but just this idea that like we need more music, we want more music. We've been kept away from getting this physical in-presence experience. And I think that we all are ready to get that back.
Totally.
I agree.
The demand for live music has gone way up this last year, basically, you know.
And I'm also a big I'm also big in that vinyl camp. I am also I may have in the past couple of years I may have I'm probably close to 200, and if I'm going to spend my money on stuff, it's books and vinyls.
I hear you there. Yeah.
That's
him and I are pretty bad. We don't need to go to Amoeba Music again and spend another.
Last time we went was we paid for the paint. We heard they were going to repaint like a whole section. We're like, oh, we'll take care of that. Don't worry.
I still order from. I mean, they're the biggest. They're still independent. They're still it's still technically it's the largest local record shop in the country.
Yeah,
it's still a local. It's not a franchise as in the same way that like you're still supporting. I order most vinyls that I can't find locally on Amoeba or Discogs. Do you guys know Discogs? It's like the Craigslist for vinyls. It's like here's this vinyl that I want. I got an original. I think it's Hounds of Love, Kate Bush original pressing. And it hooks you up. But here's an independent record label or an independent record seller in Germany.
Yeah,
here's your vinyl. No notes. Send me more.
Just blow up because of Stranger Things. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they
that's like the Metallica song that blew up because of that, you know.
Yeah, Master Puppets came back.
Well, I'll say this because I really started like working on this channel. What, Alex? 3 months ago?
We're at 3.5-ish.
Yeah, we blew over 1,000 subs like crazy fast. I think Alex was telling me some crazy stat like 90% of the YouTube channels don't make it past 1,000. But I'm going to tell you, single-handedly, without a doubt, one of the things that's fueled this is like all the shorts I did on 90s music. Like, do you want 90s musics to come back, or do you? Everyone is freaking out. And then I told Alex I was watching a Deftones video last night from 1996. And my favorite thing when you guys do it, go to a 90s video, but scroll through the comments. And every single person's like, I can't believe this is gone. I want this to come back so bad. I can't wait. So no, I 100% think it's like time. It's going to happen soon. But I'm going to put this challenge out to you guys between the four of us. And for everyone listening, drop us comments on the podcast, comments on the live stream, comments. The four of us, let's hop on, and we will do some kind of 90s style song. And then, Evan and I will definitely use our musical recording chops. And then we'll put together a song, do a few songs. But if you guys have any artists in mind, like as far as frameworks you'd love to hear, let us know. I think that would be super, super fun. But yeah, it's coming back, dude. You can feel it. It's time, So again, no pressure. The four of us, we only have to bring it back to the world. No big deal.
No big deal. That's
no worries.
We'll do their best. And so what do you guys think of maybe doing this again in a couple of weeks again? And I think it was so fun.
We'll get the time right next time,
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. I said they were deep in Chili Peppers riffs. I know.
You get lost in those vibes. You could have shown up tomorrow, and I'd have been like,
oh my God.
It's so fun. It's so fun. Well, yeah. So everyone listening, you guys are amazing. We'll keep growing this thing, and you guys, thanks for hopping on. It was super fun, and let's just keep on moving this thing forward, man. I think we're onto something special. All right.
Definitely.
All right, guys. Well, have an amazing night, and thanks for cruising on. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys later. All right.
Have a good one.
All right. Bye, guys.
Take care, guys. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.